right, Drew. Well, I have a feeling you've been looking forward to being live on Facebook for the Tuesday edition of the Not Your Average Investor Show. I am your host, Pablo Gonzalez. With me, as always, the man that I call GC because of his genius concepts, because he generates cash flows, because he's a great co-host, and because his name is Greg Cohen. Say hello, Greg.
Hello, everybody. Great to be with you.
In the chat, hanging out with us today is our community manager, Madison the Magnificent. Say hello to everybody, Madison.
Hello, everybody.
And today, the star of the show, the man who was in the circus in college, and ever since then, he's been the ringmaster. And now he's the ringmaster of the Not Your Average Investor Show community. His name, from Woodstock, Georgia, Drew Barnhill. Say hello, Drew.
Hey, it's great to be here. I'm really looking forward to this. I've been looking forward to this for a while, and I'm ready to have some fun. Hope everybody else is.
Buddy, we've been looking forward to this too. The impetus of this call was we were all having dinner, and you told me one day, you're like, you know what? I'd like to go toe-to-toe with Greg Cohen on who's got the most creative financing strategies. And we said, bet, let's do this. But before we get there, I want to welcome you if you're listening on the podcast, if you're watching on YouTube, you're watching on Facebook. Love having you here. What I would recommend you do is very carefully type in NYAIS.com. Go to the show page, register, throw it on your calendar, and show up on a Tuesday or Thursday, because this is where the magic happens, and the magic begins at the roll call. You ready for the roll call, Drew?
Absolutely.
Let's go. Madison already checked in, welcoming everybody. We got Denny Davis saying, looking good, Drew. We got the fairy godmother of the Not Your Average Investor Show community, Jen fills in saying, hey, Drew. We got Carl Thompson, good morning from sunny but chilly Colorado. We got Leslie Wilson, greetings from Denver. Maybe they're watching together, maybe they're not. Buffalo Wild Wings, who knows? We got Joanna Bautista. She's in the chat saying, let's go. Hello, JWB family. We got John Henning. Good afternoon, all. We got Bill Shields saying, what do you think he's saying, Drew?
Buenas tardes, amigos.
Buenas tardes, amigos. We got Leo Faraganan.
Well done.
Well done.
Oh, my.
Saying good morning, all from Bay Area, California. I got a little story before we go into there.
Yes.
Jen was just making fun of me yesterday, saying, we figured out a way for you to remember how to say Faraganan. You got to sing that Muppet song, Banana. Faraganan. All right, never again, Leo. We got you from now on. Thank you very much. Nadeem Shah saying good morning, good afternoon, JWB family. We got Chris Gonzaga from the lovely Hudson Valley in New York saying great day, everyone. We got, I like this trash talking between Florida State and Go Gator.
Yeah.
We got Lee Bishop, the MVP of the Not Your Average Investor Show community, saying hello, Drew. Hi, Madison. Hi, Greg. And of course, Pablo. Of course, Drew. Of course, Lee. Thank you very much. Who else we got? We got Victor Scarpula. Victor's back. Hello, everybody. Good to have you back, Victor. Great to see your name. Medj Garcia, who we don't see all the time, but she's back from vacay.
All right, Medj.
Just in time to catch the ringmaster on the show. Welcome back to the show. Medj, we got Marilyn Cotterman from Homa, Sasa, Florida.
Home of the manatees.
She says, yay for, I can't read, and Drew. And we got Anthony Dida. Our Anthony, I haven't seen your name in a while, man.
Is Anthony going to come up to the Super Duper meetup?
I would not bet against Anthony
we hope
coming to the Super Duper meetup. I want to see him. Jen Filson is, she wrote out Faraganan. Faraganan. All right, so who else we got in here? We got Noah Randari. Noah's back. Hello, everyone. Greetings from California.
Still waiting on that nickname for Noah.
TBD nickname Noah.
Yep.
Maybe that's it right there. We got Perry Brill. Perry Brill, good to see you, man. No. Perry is he is an influencer. He has like a show for optometrists. And, yeah. He's a real interesting guy. Good to have you, Perry. We got Peter James from the esteemed Commonwealth of Virginia. Salutations to you, Sir Peter. What else? We got Sergio Prieto. Go Gators.
Go Gators.
Welcome back, Sergio. Good to have you, my friend. Still scrolling right here. All right, I think we're ready to go. Perry's saying influencer, yeehaw. Love that. And we got Raj Bantu. Raj.
All right,
hello
Raj.
all. Checking in the roll call. Raj usually doesn't check in, but asks great questions. I'm glad you're joining in on the roll call, Raj, and you gave us just enough time for Stevie B to check in. Stevie B in the house. All right, so let's set the stage here. Drew Barnhill is one of the most researched people that I know. He has come into this community like a bat out of hell, just buying up properties. He's the first guy to buy a property straight off of the show, QVC style.
Good call.
We're going to talk about that. And what's fascinating about Drew is that right now we're in this moment where we know there's a unique opportunity in the rental income property investing market. We know that There's some hardship coming in the stock market. And one of the biggest pain points we get from folks is, well, I want to get in, but I don't have the money to do it. So when thinking about the best show that we could have right now, thinking about the financial engineer that we have sitting in front of us right now, we wanted to bring Drew on, have a financial engineer off between you and Drew. And
I didn't realize that's what I was stepping into.
Just a couple world-class mathletes going here in esports.
Love it.
Drew, I think the first place I would like to start is that in your onboarding, you talked to me about the importance of having a flexible, adaptable strategy for what you're doing. I think in these times, it'd be really interesting to get into that speaking point first, and then we're gonna get into all your tricks.
Yeah. Well, first thing I'd just like to point at Greg, I'd like to say that I got a little bit of advantage on Greg because I've gone broke twice. And he's always been very successful. So I've had to be very creative in a lot of financing and everything like that, because starting over from going broke teaches you a lot of valuable lessons in obtaining capital to stop from being broke once you've done something, kind of thing. I talk about this in all investments, even real estate is something, the short-term fluctuations, all these things are all about fear and greed. When people are scared to buy something, it goes down. And when people think they all want to have it, it goes up. So trying to predict the mass psychology of the American public is a very difficult thing to do. And that's why Greg talks about all the time. Short-term, predictions are notoriously difficult and often wrong. Right. So I try to be flexible in my scenarios. Like I said, I like to do some short-term predicting, as we all do. But I also know that if this happens, I've got this strategy that'll apply. If this happens, I've got another strategy. It's kind of like you have plan A, that doesn't work, plan B, that doesn't work, plan C. And I've even had to go to plan D sometimes, So you want to prepare for every eventuality because you don't know what may happen. It may hit. We talked about a lot of different things as far as strategy goes and everything. Flings flip-flop, like I'll go into last year. Last year, conventional financing was the bomb. Mm-hmm. I got a property in May, 3.5%, 30-year fixed. I got two properties in December, 3.8%, 30-year fixed. I closed on a property this morning, and I did go conventional, probably my last one conventional, 6.125%. Mm-hmm. Still cash flow positive, but it cut about $100 off my cash flow. I did get a little bit of increase because we actually have that property is already leased. It was leased last week, and it did get a little bump up in the lease, so that helped mitigate that, the rent's going up and everything like that. So still cash flow positive. So I'm fine with that. But I've actually got this next house, which Pablo was referring to, the one bought on that was on the show. And basically that was the first one where most of the times the properties were not available. And they said this one was available, Literally I texted Brandon and I said, hey, tell me more about this house and everything like that. Yeah. And it's still in the show, or in the middle of the show. And about 15 minutes later, Brandon calls me and he says, I said, I really like that property. It was a corner lot. It's a bigger lot, like 7,000 square foot, which I kind of like because you never down the road, sure, things redeveloping. So I looked at that and he called me. He says, well, there's interest in this property. And I said, all right, Brandon, lock it up for me. And literally locked it up during the show. And that was kind of funny, It was a momentous moment. I think we should NFT that show and call it how it is. GC, what do you think about this idea of having a flexible strategy and being able to pivot and all the stuff that Drew's talking about?
I mean, I go back to those moments when I was buying those rental properties in 2006 and 2007. For those who are not veterans of the show yet, I bought about 40 rental properties at the height of the market, and I was 22, 23 years old. And at that point, I, learned how to do this through books, and I had mentors who showed me the way. But I went out and I just, bought a lot of properties, had a lot of debt on my back at that point, and was hoping I was right. And then the market dropped 35%. And I'm not your super aggressive type of risk taker overall. So if you take all of that into account, before I actually went forward with buying those properties, I ran scenario A, I ran scenario B, I ran scenario D, scenario C, scenario D, right? So everything that Drew's talking about there is the reason why I got so excited about this investment. Scenario D was the market drops 35%. in price. Am I still going to be okay? Is this still a good move? Is this still a good thing for me to do, to take on, millions of dollars in debt at that point and quit my day job? Does this still make sense? And the answer was yes. And it wasn't about the home prices. It was about the home rents and the positive cash flow to get you that positive cash flow so that you could stay in the game long enough to benefit from home price appreciation. So yes, a flexible strategy is absolutely paramount. I think flexibility is important, but when I go into big life decisions, I look at the best case scenario and I look at the worst case scenario. And if the worst case scenario is still pretty good, and I do have upside in the best case scenario, I'm usually going to take that. Usually going to take that opportunity. And that's what we have in rental property investing.
Love that. All right. Well, we got our first question here in the Q&A from Denny Davis. Drew, what Denny really wants to know is, how are you breathing without a spacesuit?
Actually, I'm an alien, and argon and neon are actually my atmosphere of choice.
Here I was thinking that the Not Your Average Investor Show shirt was some kind of a spacesuit. All right, I was way off.
Yeah. By the way, that's my shirt. I see them talking about it in the chat and everything like that. And before I leave, one thing I want to make sure I mention, I want to give a shout out to JWB Cares, what you guys are doing with that, and that if you guys don't know, it's just a wonderful charity, giving away houses to veterans that serve the country, and things of this nature. And it's just a wonderful thing. If you can at all, when you do a property, just do an extra $100 to them. It's well spent and well deserved.
Thank you so much for bringing that to light. Yeah. I mean, the ability to align our mission with our clients, and to do that when folks are really excited about buying a property or doing a private loan for us, that simple thing where people can just say, yeah, tack on $100 there. I'm going to help build some houses for some veterans that are in need, has made a lot of difference. I mean, listen, JWB Cares is an organization. We raise money generally through our charity golf tournament every year. So we've been looking for kind of like ongoing ways that we can keep this mission memorable and lively, and have donations coming in regularly. So when we together put that opportunity together, clients have just run with it. We raise thousands of dollars each year by all of you clients, just like Drew, adding $100 here and there. So we appreciate you, and Drew, thank you so much for bringing that up.
All right. Time for the financial engineer off, right? So GC puts a couple points on the board in 2006, okay. 40 properties, conventional financing. Drew, let's start with you. How many properties do you have? How many rental properties do you have right now?
Including the one I closed on about 3 hours ago, 4.
All right.
And I've got another one that will be done here shortly. That's the one, the 220 day is not done yet. And that's the one I want to talk about with the flexibility, and go into what I mean about flexibility, because I've actually changed the way I'm going to finance that because of market conditions.
Okay. All right. Well, let's go.
So basically, it was like February show, and I acquired this property, and we waited, and I had to wait for the renovations on it, because there's quite a bit of renovations happening, and it was just released for renovations before. And right now, so I'm kind of looking at this. I couldn't put the money together to do both of them in a cash situation, but at a 6.125, I did get that. But now I'm looking at the next property. And like I said, I was rushing to try to get everything in when the conventional rates were lower, missed that window a little bit. But now I'm in a unique situation where short-term rates are actually below mortgage rates. I can literally borrow from my credit cards cheaper than I get a mortgage. So I'm looking at financing this one going cash, and a couple of different reasons for that. It's not really cash for me, because I'm actually going to, and this is a strategy that I use a lot. Greg talks about the HELOCs. That's a critical component of my strategy. And also balance transfers. I've used balance transfers now for the last 10, 12 years on my credit cards. It is literally the cheapest source of funding. I started 2 businesses doing this, because I went out, even the SBA loans were all at 6, 7, 8%, and I'm saying like that. And I could borrow on my credit cards for a 3% fee, 0% in a year and a half. So I'm basically paying a 3% fee to hold money for a year and a half. And I started developing these strategies in conjunction with the HELOC to finance a lot of different things. And the way I did this, and this is, I kind of want to go into this because I'm not the anti-Dave Ramsey, but what Dave Ramsey does is great for undisciplined people that are neophytes with understanding their money. I understand that, and I appreciate what he's doing, because people that get in trouble with money, his strategy kind of works for them. But if you're a disciplined person that understands budgeting and understands accounting and how you have to keep track of things, you can do a lot with smart debt. You know, Greg, we talk about smart debt all the time and everything like that.
You know it.
And the difference between bad debt is borrowing money for stuff. Smart debt is borrowing money to buy things that make you money, you know, quite honestly. And so I've been using this for that. And then I discovered another thing, because of the couple of businesses I saw. I got, LLCs established, a couple of businesses, something like that. And then I found out I could get credit cards on the businesses, okay, using my personal credit. Basically, I'm a guarantor on these credit cards on the businesses. But the nice thing about these credit cards on the businesses is they don't report to the personal credit bureau, you see. So the downside of using balance transfers and things of that nature is anybody knows anything about the credit scoring, credit utilization is a big part of it. And if you utilize a lot of your credit card limit, it will limit your score. Mm-hmm. So I started developing the strategy was that I got credit cards that would give me balance transfers on the businesses. So I could borrow money at 0% on the businesses and everything like that, and still keep my 800 credit score, because my credit utilization is basically 0 to 1% on the personal side, because these credit cards do not report to the personal credit bureau. So LLCs and balance transfers and HELOCs, and of course I have a HELOC on my personal credit, and that's where I have the HELOC is set up. I have 28 credit cards. People say, well, what are you doing with 28 credit cards? How do you need 28 credit cards? And my answer to that is kind of says, it's better to have and not need than need and not have. Yeah. And and a lot of the reasons I developed so many credit cards is because I do the rolling strategy. So people say, yeah, but if you borrow a bunch of money on these balance transfers in a year and a half, they come off and you're stuck with 18, 20% rate and everything like that. And then you can get into real trouble. Very valid point. That's where you have to be disciplined. So I have enough credit cards that I can roll them in. Like, let's say I do a $20,000 balance transfer on this credit card, and I do the minimum payment each time. And after the year and a half, it comes down, and there's still 15, 16,000 on there. I always have another credit card I can do a balance transfer off, and I'll pay that on and extend me, get another year and a half. And I've literally done this for 12 years, just rolling them over. But I have a spreadsheet on everything. I had all the credit cards on the spreadsheet. I have how much is in them. I have the date on there when it's coming off balance transfer. So I know, so I can plan. I got this card now that I can transfer that balance over to. So it is a bit of work, and it does take some discipline. There's no question about that, but it's an incredibly cheap source of financing. And like I said, for this property that I'm doing now, and Teresa's still trying to get me to, to do the financing. I understand that, because she makes some money off of that. But the fact of the matter is I can literally, and like on my Discovery card, they'll give me a personal loan right now, $35,000 at 5.9%.
Gotcha.
The DSCR and the conventional is now 6 to 6.5% and things of that nature. Mm-hmm. So my plan is to try to amass the money from these cheaper sources and everything like that, pay cash. Another nice thing about paying cash, I already talked to Tara and McKillop, is my closing cost will be about $1,500 on the cash. It'll be almost $9,000 on the DSCR, because the DSCR, you pay a lot more in closing costs and like that. So I'm saving $7,500 right there. Plus, I'm fortunate I have the free cash flow each month that I can handle all this, that I don't that it doesn't get me into trouble in that. And I can sit for 6 months. 6 months, we'll see what happens. A year, let's see what happens. If conventional rates to go down, they're back in the 4s again, I would consider refinancing and taking some more money out, buy more houses, of course, kind of scenario and everything like that. And meanwhile, if it doesn't, and I have to transfer these over to another credit card, I've got that in place. So I've got a lot of different, depending upon what happens in the next 6 months, I've got a lot of different avenues that I can go to keep this whole thing going.
All right, time out.
Okay.
I'm out on the engineer off here.
Okay.
Greg, explain this to me like a baby. So confused. That was a lot.
This is a really advanced strategy.
Uh-huh.
It is one that I have used as well. And I'll walk you through how I do it. Slightly different than what Drew's doing. But, right now, Drew is looking at his ability to secure a mortgage when he buys a rental property. And let's just call it it was roughly a 6% interest rate is what he could be securing the mortgage for the most recent property. So the cost of his debt is 6%. All right. Now, what Drew is also able to do is to use his credit. And when you go out and you have a credit card, right, what is not always known, but what is possible many times is for you to get what they call a balance transfer, where they will give you a certain amount of the credit available to you. So if you have a very high credit limit, they will say, listen, Pablo, instead of you, buying that property, or Drew, instead of you buying that property using 6% debt for your mortgage, you might just go and do this balance transfer where the credit card company actually basically gives you a check, and it's a very low introductory rate. It's 0%, especially that's the one that Drew's talking about. It's been 0% for the ones that I've been using. But what they do is they charge a 3% fee to be able to access the money. And the other thing is that they give you a very short timeline to pay it back. So it's generally about a year and a half. Those are the ones that I've used. And Drew, it's the same for you, right?
Yes.
0%.
That's typical. Anywhere from typically, sometimes there's lows a year, but most of them are 13 to 17, 18 months in that range. Yeah.
There you go. So what Drew's looking at, he's like, well, I can get a loan for, and let's just assume that he's putting 20% down. So a loan for 80% of the purchase price and pay 6% interest on that money. Or just to compare apples to apples, let's say he could get that same amount that he would borrow at 6%. He could now borrow it for a year at 3%.
Okay.
So significant savings on the interest that he does not have to pay by going the 3% fee route, right? 0% interest, 3% fee over a year means 3% borrowing cost, right? So he saves that. And he's also saying, well, a lot less closing costs to do this, because it might cost like $100 to do the balance transfer that the credit card costs you, versus, 7, 8, 9 grand in total closing costs to purchase the home using conventional debt. So on the surface here, you make a lot more money in the short run, or you spend a lot less money in the short run by going down this advanced strategy when using a balance transfer. Don't let the balance transfer thing trip you up. It tripped me up many years ago before I started to do this. I thought I actually had to have a balance to transfer and cover on my credit card.
Okay.
No.
Can I jump in real quick 1 minute on that? Because sometimes you do. And that's, yes, sometimes you do. But that's one of the things I also wanted to mention there. And that's why, and I'll give Discover a shout out here, because as far as I'm concerned, Discover is the best credit card in the entire world. If you don't have a Discover card, you need to look into it, because what Discover does is it allows you to put money directly in your bank account with a balance transfer. Not all of them do. A lot of them, other ones do, but then they can make you jump through some hoops. Discover, I can do it like instantaneous in 30 seconds. Okay. Now, what that does for me is, what I'll do is I have Discover with a high limit and everything like that. So I keep, and Discover has they always have a one with a fee and one without a fee. The one without a fee is right now is at 5.99%. So that way I can do that and pay that off very quickly, because I don't have to worry about paying the fee and then losing the 0%, because it's a zero fee and then 5.99% for a year and a half after that. So what I do, this is all part of the strategy. Also, if I have other credit cards that won't let their balance transfers only pay off a balance and do not put things in, what I do is I keep throwing the Discover. I throw money in the HELOC with the Discover. $15,000, $20,000, and then I do a balance transfer from that credit card to Discover, paying it off normally in the same month, because I can do that in the same month, so it never even shows on my credit report. You see what I'm saying? So
that's taking it to a whole nother level.
Tell me why it's another level, GC.
Well, just the orchestration of everything he's doing. Let me talk about the simplest approach here, right? So we talked about how if Drew is buying this property, he could pay 6% interest on his money to borrow it. Or now, if he used a balance transfer, he could, in essence, pay 3% for the first year.
Okay.
Let's call it, just to keep it simple. So good there. You see how that, see how
I
that
see
works?
that. Well, real quick point of clarification. Is he taking out a down payment or is he taking out money for an entire property?
Drew, let me ask you, what are you doing there? Are
In
you
this
taking out
case,
just,
it's for an entire property.
Right.
Because of the fact that the entire property, where I get significant savings in the short run is because, like I said, and I've already talked to Tara at McKelvey about that, it costs about $1,500 in closing costs to do a property in cash.
Yeah.
As opposed to it'd be about 8,000 or 9,000 in the DSCR.
Okay.
And so you're right off the bat, you're saving $7,500, which is a significant amount of savings when you're talking about, this is a 145K property. So,
okay. So that's what we're talking about. We're talking about taking out 145K
Mhm.
from a credit card balance transfer.
yes.
Okay.
You can do that. And so that makes sense day one to do just from a numbers perspective. Now, guys, you got to be aware here that this is way advanced. There are certain other risks to think about while doing this. I wouldn't suggest this for everybody. But if you are the ringmaster and you know what you're doing and you have spreadsheets and you are monitoring this, this is a way for you to save a lot of money. The challenge is you got to have a plan for what you're going to do in a year and a half when this thing is due.
absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
So, so when he's talking about some credit card balance transfers requiring that you have a balance to pay off, well, that's important. Sometimes they will just give you the money straight to your bank account. You are in essence getting a loan. It's just like if you had $150,000 limit on your credit card, then you could, get $150,000 check into your bank account, which then you could use the thing and go and buy that property if it was $150,000. But if you have a balance on there, well, then Drew's got another credit card lined up that will offer the same 0% interest and 3% fee to borrow it for the next year and a half. And so he basically, in essence, is replacing 3% debt on his property over and over and over again. So he's, in essence, he's figured out a way to pay 3% or 3.5% or whatever.
And if I'm understanding this correctly, I mean, I got two kind of questions. First is just like, let me know if I'm understanding this correctly. In that year and a half, you will also have paid down some of the balance, right? Like you're not just transferring a year and a half, the same exact balance. It's not going up either, right?
Let me kind of go into that. Also, this is where the HELOC comes into play in that also. All these credit cards, I have them automatically pay the minimum. The HELOC automatically pays the minimum amounts each month. So I don't have to worry about, do I miss a payment, everything like that, keeping on top of that. Every one of them is being paid by the HELOC automatically. So I don't have to, I don't even have to think about it. You can set your credit cards up to be paid automatically, the minimum, the total balance or whatever with that. And the HELOC does that. The HELOC is another important part of this strategy. Okay, because I have on my personal residence here, I have $150,000 HELOC. So it means I can borrow up to $150,000 of it. But I keep this. This is also my security blanket, my ace in the hole and everything like that. If I do get to a point where I have to wait a little bit on the credit card and everything like that, and I got one that's coming due with $15,000, $20,000 like that, boom, I can pay the whole thing off with the HELOC, because I keep credit available into that. So it affords me that flexibility. Then I can wait on the other one to go through with that. So you do need some, as Greg's saying, you do need some flexibility in this, and it does take planning. This is like I said, this is not for your Dave Ramsey kind of client or anything like that they think a credit card, is you can just spend a bunch of money and not pay it back and everything like that and get them in trouble. This is a very planned approach, and it does. I mean, to me, I love it. I love this kind of thing. Pablo and I've had this conversation before. I love playing with money. I love arbitrage. I like, and I come from a financial planning background too. So I've kind of looked at a lot of these things. And it's just like Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Well, I've also read books on arbitrage. And arbitrage is simply, this is the way rich people make money. Basically, they borrow at one rate and loan it out at another rate. And this is a strategy that also, if I didn't go this strategy, I was actually planning on coming in at about $100,000 from my balance transfers and throwing it into the JWP hard money lending program too, because then I'm picking up 7% without spending any of my own money. I'm paying 3% on the credit cards. I'm getting 10% from JWP. I'm getting a 7% spread without ever using any of my own money. So
awesome. Yeah. Before we start talking more strategies, right?
Okay.
That one's pretty clear to me. That one's pretty straight up. Okay. So now we are, okay, so we are transferring balance after balance. Number one, Tara Padgett's got a question. Is this for flip properties or rentals? This is for buy and hold rentals that we're talking about here.
Right. And a lot of the reasons, just as Greg has been to this many times, and I like the buy and hold strategies is because it's more conservative. And I have more safety in that, because like I said, all my properties with JWB are cash flow positive. And let's say, like the Alpha property has done great for me. I mean, I bought it at 165. Zillow says it's worth 208 now. And I got, that was my first property credit because it was under rented at 925. You guys gave me $5,400. Nice. Shout out to that. But that property loses 25% of its value. We have a hard, which I don't expect, but we could have hard and everything like that. I got a tenant in there on a long-term lease, paying that off. The thing with assets is that where people run into problems with assets and where they get in trouble is when they're forced to sell. If you're forced to sell at the lowest point, that's where you make money. Same with the stock market, with anything else. If you're on margin in the stock market, you get a margin call because their stocks have gone down. You're forced to sell at the money. And to maintain flexibility, you want to have yourself in a position where you're never forced to do anything. If you're not forced to do anything, then you can make rational, intelligent decisions. When you're forced, these are not rational, intelligent decisions. And the flippers game, you're a prisoner to the market in the flippers game. I knew a lot of people that was in this game in 2006, 2007, and basically lost their ass. I knew a guy that had 8 properties that he was flipping, and basically these properties lost 20-30% of their value and everything like that. And so he basically had $2 million, $3 million in loans, and the properties weren't worth but $1 million, $1.5 million in total.
Yeah, I know a guy like that too, who lost a lot of money trying to flip properties when the market turned. It was me, right? We talk about the rentals that worked out really, really well. Well, I also had properties that I was flipping at that time. They didn't go so well. So,
but the long term is what saved you, because that's steady and that's steady income. And that's what I'm looking at. Another thing is I turned 66 in a few weeks and everything like that. And as I mentioned before, I've gone broke twice. I ain't going broke again. I'm too old to start over again now and everything like that. So let
me add one thing to Tara's question though. We talk a lot more about rental properties and long-term holds here. This strategy can also be used for raising capital to do a flip, right? You've got a year or a year and a half before, in essence, the loan is due back to their credit card company. It's actually more similar to a hard money loan, which is a term you use mainly in flipping properties. So it can actually be a less expensive hard money loan to do that. But I do want to talk about sometimes about how this doesn't work out well. Again, so I was doing things like this, and when should I talk about some of the downsides to this?
Let's talk about the downside. First, I want to get a couple of clarifications, because there's a bunch of questions around this idea of what happens when the credit card is due, right? So Bill Shields is asking, so what's the strategy? Pay the card off when they come due in a year, or who is paying off the HELOC? I think it was somebody else asked, Victor asked, Victor said that he likes the strategies experimented with, but those balances come up quick, right? So are you always counting on the availability of another credit card being able to have a zero transfer balance in this? And does that mean that you got to get a new one, or you have them lined up already?
Well, that's getting a new one is also is a possibility. If you run things right and you don't max out your utilization and things of this nature, and you keep that, they're always, you guys know this, you always get advertising. There's always new ones available that you can do things with and everything like that. But I would say that 90% of the time things are going to be available, but that's where the HELOC comes in. You do have situations where you might be in a short-term crunch. Having that HELOC availability that you can pay that off to sit for a couple months until something comes due and everything is crucial. And I use the HELOC strategy also. I think we talked about this, Greg. My HELOC is my emergency fund, because people talk about it all the time. I used to keep, $35,000, $40,000 in the checking accounts, emergency fund, just like people say, for your lifestyle and everything like that. But that money's sitting there doing nothing. Okay, so I use my HELOC. Basically, I don't keep a lot of money in my checking account. I run everything I make kind of goes into the HELOC and everything. I'm keeping that down so that way I'm literally, it's making me money, because basically it's making me money because I'm not paying interest on that money that I would on the house fund and everything like that. But if I come and have an emergency and I need $30,000 or $40,000, it's there. And as you know, Greg, I can get it instantly from the HELOC, and that's a great.
And who pays that down, Drew? If you're in a pinch, like if you're taking out 40 grand from your HELOC, is that just like a very low interest loan? So if worse comes to worse, it's out there and all you have to do is pay interest on it?
And that's another thing. Can I give a shout out to a company, Greg? Is that?
Of course, yeah.
Okay. Look into Third Federal Cleveland. Best HELOC, I researched this again. Best HELOC I've ever seen. It's like 3%.
Is it a Cleveland company? Come on, Drew. Any company out there, you got to choose a Cleveland company. You know,
I didn't choose it. They chose me with their rates. They're like 3% below prime. Greg, last year on my HELOC, I was paying 2.1%. And it is a variable rate, so you got to look at that. And right now, even with the interest rates going up, I'm paying 2.9% on my HELOC, because their HELOC is set back, and their rates were so much better, because typically the HELOCs are priced, as a version of prime, as you well know, and theirs was so much better than everybody else. And I had no idea who Third. I just researched it, and I came across them on the internet. And they'll do it like anywhere. They just have a notary come to me here in Atlanta, just like you guys do, and boom, and and they're very popular. But check them out, because they have the best rates on.
Okay, so that answers Leslie's question. What bank? Third Federal of Cleveland. Is that a credit union or a bank? It's a bank.
It is a savings and loan.
It's a savings and loan.
What it is.
They do investment properties?
They do not. That's the one downfall they do. Because I actually, you know me, I researched that. I said, how about HELOCs on investment? They will not do HELOCs on investment properties, which I'm researching further, and we might do another show, but I've got some, things about that you can't get the great deals in there, but there's more and more companies are getting interested in this,
All right. So Sergio asks, these credit cards, you mentioned this before, these are all under your business entity, right? Not personal?
No. I've got 28, I would say 7 are business and 21 are personal.
Okay.
It's around that. Yeah, it's around that figure. Yes.
Okay. And then Marilyn asked, from Homosassa, Florida.
Home of the Manatees.
All right. She asked, how many actual credit cards are you using to do this process? 28.
Well, I have 28, but I don't ever have more than probably 5, 6, or 7 going at one time.
Okay. GC, talk to me about the downsides of this.
Okay. So, I've lived this strategy. I'll tell you how I use it mainly, and how I would recommend, if somebody wants to be more advanced, how I have seen it done more often for clients purchasing long-term rentals. What Drew is describing is the most fantastic orchestration that I have ever seen and heard talked about. I don't know if I've ever talked to another really successful rental property investor who has played this credit card balance roulette with as much orchestra and syndication coordination. So I think it can work in theory, but I would hesitate from recommending anybody jump into that, just because there are things to consider here that could get you in trouble, and it might be the things you're not thinking about. So and here's a question that Denny asked: is there such thing as a HELOC on an investment property? Well, I'll answer that in just a second. But at the core of this, Drew, it sounds like you've got this incredible orchestra going on of credit cards and replacing balances with other balance transfers on credit cards. And you feel really good about your home equity line of credit being that source of, rainy day fund capital. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes.
Okay.
Also, one of the things, I have 28 credit cards, and I'm typically running 4 or 5 or 6 in time and everything like that. So I have a lot, you don't want to do this. You don't want to have 6 of 8 credit cards involved, because the flexibility can get hairy.
So one thing that not a lot of people think about or have ever experienced, but that I experienced as a fledgling business owner in 2006 and a fledgling real estate investor in 2006 and 2007, is when the economy doesn't go so well, one of the first things that banks cut is home equity lines of credit. And they might tell you that you have $100,000 or $200,000 or $1 million on your home equity line of credit. And one day you just might look at your home equity line of credit limit and it might be 0. They might just close it.
Can I chime in on that one a little bit?
Yeah. Sure.
That has only happened one time in history. And it is the time that you're heading back. HELOCs have been around for 50 years or more and everything like that. And I've kind of watched them evolve and everything like that. The only time that's ever happened was the 2006 and 7 period. And I really think for that to happen again, because we've had a lot of downturns since then, and I've never had a problem with them doing that, especially if you have a good history with them. We'd have to have that kind of event coming again. And I can't tell you how confident I am that that's not going to happen, because those events are what we call generational events. And when generational events happen, that means they call them generational events because everybody has to die before that happens again. Because everybody remembers that. Even now, you'll see everybody talking about, oh, it's going back to 2006, the crash is coming and everything like that, without understanding how different times are and the credit excesses and things like that. And that's what happens is when you got people alive that remember these horrible things. It was the same thing as the stock market depression. Those don't happen again because you have to have people forget about that before we can run those kind of excesses to make that super crash happen.
Agreed. Agreed. It's unlikely, and you're absolutely right. Denny's question was, do they offer home equity lines of credit on investment properties? The answer today is no. You generally just do not see them unless you have an incredible relationship with typically a local bank that knows everything about you. And I still haven't heard any of our clients who actually have home equity lines of credit on their investment properties. If they could, that would be a huge source of capital with the equity gains that have been made by JWB clients over the past few years. So if anybody is aware of them, I would love to hear more about that. But to answer your question, Denny, it's no. But they did do that back in the day. That was the source of capital for me to get started.
Yeah.
I would buy a property one day, renovate it, go to the bank the next day, say, hey, there's $30,000 worth of equity in this on an investment property. Will you give me a home equity line of credit on it? And they'd say, yeah, sure. You're 23. You look like you know what you're doing. Sure, go for it. Right. That's as easy as it was back in the day.
Yeah.
And then, of course, when what happened in 2007, 8, 9, 10, those were the first things to go. These credit card balance transfers. I don't remember exactly what happened in 2006 and 2007, according to these in terms of these credit card balance transfers. But I pretty much guarantee you those are the first things that were no longer available as well. So
actually they were.
Oh, really?
The credit card balance transfer offers were still in effect. They typically were 5 and 6% fee back then, as opposed to a 2 and 3% fee now. But they were still. Yeah,
they probably weren't giving the cash to you directly. They probably had some extra hoops to jump through, I would imagine, right?
Yeah, and your credit score had, you had to have a good relationship with your credit card, and your credit score had to be high. Yeah.
So, I'm trying to paint a potentially completely opposite picture, worst case scenario. You guys know that's how I think, right? I want to think about the worst case scenario as well. If your strategy, if you do not have a lot of cash or access to a home equity line of credit or some other short-term capital, your orchestra could come crashing down if you base your entire strategy on this. So if you're going to play at this level that Drew's playing at, make sure that you have some combination of something backing you up, cash to back this thing up, or access to capital that really probably is not going to get taken away. That would be my advice there. Also want to talk about just how I've seen it be, I guess, more user-friendly, both for myself and for clients, right? You don't have to go to Drew's level to take advantage of this idea and this strategy, right? We talked about how Drew is using this to replace the entire replace the entire purchase of his property. If you could come up with a strategy where you could just use this to cover a portion of your overall purchase, AKA your down payment, and you had a plan in place to actually pay this thing off within a year and a half through the use of a home equity line of credit or through regular old saving money, or maybe you have some bonuses that are coming to you. That's more of the strategy that I see actually playing out. And it feels a little bit more comfortable for our network, or at least for me to sort of recommend. Because
that's actually what I've done, Greg, up until now. I have done it for down payments. The one thing that caveat I will say to that is you got to watch your DTI.
Right.
Because that they can affect your DTI. And that's one of the things, the nice thing about the LLC strategy is it doesn't affect your DTI because it's not reported to your personal credit bureau. So you can amass on an LLC balance transfer, you can get a down payment and then it doesn't affect your DTI at all. So I just wanted to interject that.
Yeah, no, that's really great stuff. I mean, what you're doing, if you go in that strategy, you're taking advantage of everything that Drew is sharing with you as far as this overcoming this obstacle, saying that we don't have access to the money in order to buy the asset that we want. You're overcoming this, but now you're reducing the variables on, listen, if the economy would go in the tank and if HELOCs would get pulled away, your exposure here is not, $200,000. It might be $40,000, right? And if you also minimize the risk and the exposure by thinking about this and saying, well, geez, over the next year and a half, how much cash can I actually stockpile through savings or future bonuses? And you actually put that towards, paying off this down payment that you now have on your credit card. And those are two things that I think just minimize the exposure. And it's something that we've seen be really successful with JWB clients. So that's really where I see it probably most applicable for most who are listening on this call.
And I totally agree with that, Greg. And like I said, I've been utilizing that up until now. The only thing is getting me to do this whole property in that is because of the interest rate environment. It has changed.
Exactly.
And that's what's getting me to do this. And another thing, and I will have to give a caveat. Number one, I'm an accountant. Number two, I've been honing this strategy for 15 years, so it is kind of a bit involved. And another thing is I have free cash flow. I have a free cash flow of over $5,000 a month that basically I pay everything that I do to live on, and I still have over $5,000 a month coming in. So that gives me some flexibility with this too. So I want to give that caveat out and everything like that too. I don't recommend doing this and cutting yourself right to that limit, just as you said. Like I said, I got 28 credit cards. I'm typically not using more than 4 or 5 of them at one time. Have yourself that flexibility. Have yourself, as you say, have some cash reserve, have other places to go. The more places you have to go, the more safety you have in that. And I couldn't agree more,
Love it.
Wow. All right. I feel like we've come full circle. That was really good. We got a couple more questions. Noah Randari asks, why don't you just use the HELOC to finance the entire deal without using the balance transfers?
Good question. I don't have enough in the HELOC balance, but that's the only criticism I have of Third Federal of Cleveland is that they will not do a HELOC over 150K, even if your equity warrants it. So I've got the max on them at 150K and everything like that. And I typically keep around 70, 80, 90 in there and self flexibility. So I don't have enough to do that. And actually that's a good point, because some of it is coming from the HELOC. I'm not doing the whole, and that's another thing is I'm not doing the whole thing from balance transfers. Also, that thing with Discover, that I can get $35,000 out of them at 5.9% for a year. It pays it off. It's $1,000 payment a year and everything like that. I can literally use what's coming in for the rent to pay that off. That'll get things paid off quicker. So I'm in a better position to refinance later on than that. So the balance transfers is not doing all of it. I'm kind of mixing and matching, what makes sense and planning the whole thing out. I can't stress this enough. Planning is essential for this. You got to know where you're going, and spreadsheets to handle your planning are essential in this.
And if I got you correctly, the way that you're planning this, Drew, you have a spreadsheet with all your credit cards, you have date of payment for the credit card, you have balance that you can transfer to and from, and you have date that it comes up so that you are doing that. Are there any other kind of like things to put on that spreadsheet so you keep?
Well, I have credit limits too, so I can look at that and see what the credit limits, so I can see what I've got that I can use the balance transfers on. And another thing is when you get your credit cards, there are certain ones like that won't do balance transfers. Don't do them. They'll tell you right up front the ones that will do balance transfers. Like I said, Discover's a great one. It's more flexible than any other credit card out there because they always have two types of, you can do the 3% fee, for 0% interest, or you can do the 0 fee at 5.9% interest. And it gives you more fun. And you can always, and Discover, always you can put it in the bank account. I've had some that sometimes you can put it in the bank account and sometimes you can't,
Okay, so we got a couple questions here before we get out of here. Tara Paget asks, am I understanding correctly that you are getting a check from your lenders like Discover? So it's usually are you using the cash advance feature? What's the difference in the cash advance feature?
Not the cash advance.
It's not a cash advance because that changes the numbers of what we're talking about.
Yes.
They are putting cash into your bank account, but it is a balance transfer. Even if you don't have a balance that it is taking over. So
It
Yeah.
does. They do it through ACH.
Got it.
Yeah, they do
Okay.
it through ACH.
All right. So it's just not called the cash advance.
No, do not do the cash advance.
not do the
The
cash
cash advance is the worst way.
Okay. All right,
Yeah.
cool. Misty Johnson is asking, can you talk about portfolio loans and debt service loans? Had two bankers I was referred to make phone appointments with me and then never call. I would like to understand these options. Either of you guys want to take that one?
It's just a loan on your portfolio. In fact, that, a couple that I'm bringing down there in Jacksonville, they actually did this to buy their Airbnb in Destin. They literally just took a loan against their portfolio with Merrill Lynch, but they have a significant assets in there and everything. You do that. Also, what Greg brought up last is another great strategy. And I was going to go to this, but borrowing against your 401k. Great. Another source of funds and income, and it also could be a source of safety. If I do get into trouble on that, Greg, I still have significant in the 401ks that I could always borrow. You can always borrow against them.
Good point.
They make up for a short fall and everything like that. So you can't have enough sources of income or sources of revenue from my standpoint and everything like that. Amass as many as you can. You don't have to be wedded to any one. You can pick and pop whichever's best for the situation that you're in.
Love it.
All right. And that was kind of what Raj was saying in the Q&A, that there's simpler strategies like 401k loans for down payment, and the interest is paid back to your 401k account, and there's no credit checks, nor does it impact debt to income ratios. Thank you, Raj.
I'll add on to that.
Yeah.
The important thing here is these strategies actually put cash into your bank account, then you can use however way you want. Hopefully you're buying assets with it. So many people aren't aware of the 401k loan, but it's the same thing that we're talking about is this fancy balance transfer.
And by the way, Raj with another great comment. I feel like Raj, we've been sleeping on Raj as a guest. I would love to have Raj on a Thursday or a Tuesday, maybe, Raj, if you're interested. Raj puts, when we take credit cards on business accounts, the balance may not show on personal credit report, but they check our personal credit in order to approve. Too many credit inquiries reduce our credit score.
Okay, I can answer that real well. I actually, when I got out of college in 1980, I went to work for General Electric Credit Corporation, and we were developing the whole credit scoring system as of that time and everything like that. And I will tell you this, I maintain a 790 to 810 credit score, and I always have the worst rating when it comes to inquiries. I'm always at the max, it's poor and everything like that. That is such a small part of your credit scoring. It's only 5% of the credit scoring. If you're at the poorest rating, it will affect your credit score by no more than 10 points. I would not let that be a hindrance to you and everything like that. I don't even worry about inquiries because I always have more inquiries than, like I said, I'm everything else is an excellent. If you look at your credit scoring, everything else is excellent. My inquiries is always poor, and I still maintain an 800 credit score.
I like it. Hey, I wanted to add one more real life example of how this whole conversation can really help. And it's storytelling a little bit about my family, my mother-in-law. So my mother-in-law, Esther, is a private lender for JWB. Her and my father-in-law, they've been lending. They do private lending. They also do owning of turnkey rental properties. But when we're talking about doing private lending, what they have been doing most lately, they have 4 or 5 rental properties. They're nearing retirement age and yada, yada, yada. Well, what Drew's talking about here, where we're talking about basically using the 3% cost of a balance transfer and borrowing against your credit card, is a strategy that you can really use to create this what we call arbitrage. Arbitrage means you borrow it at 3% and you lend it at 10% for private lending. So this strategy of using this credit card arbitrage is something that I've done, and I've seen a lot of clients use even more on the private lending side. And the reason it plays probably a little bit better on the private lending side is because the private loans that you're investing in, right? The loans that you're making are short-term loans. They have a 3-year payback, but our average payback is a lot less than that. So your exposure to actually have this thing paid off through your original balance transfer is a lot less. You may have it paid off in 1 or 2. But this is how I related it to my mother-in-law, right? She was able to borrow this money at 3%. Let's say it was $100,000, right? That's $3,000 in cost, but she's able to lend it out at $10,000. Excuse me, at 10% interest, meaning she would earn 10% if she lent to JWB's private lending program. And she said, "Oh, I don't know. It sounds really risky." And I said, "Okay, well, you really like to travel, right? And she said, yeah. And I said, well, how much did that last vacation cost? And she said, it cost, I don't know, about $7,000. And I said, what if this was something that you could do that could pay for a vacation for you every single year or 2 years? Is it something that you'd be interested in? And she said, yes, sign me up. So that's the way that it made sense to my mother-in-law. Using that credit card balance transfer way, is for many people, it's accessible depending on the credit card you have. I would encourage you to look into it. Maybe it's on the private lending side. Maybe it's to use as your down payment for a rental property. If you're going to go with something that has a much longer horizon, though, like a rental property, make sure that you have a few aces up your sleeve to get this thing paid off, not just keeping it in place. And the first one I would say is use your own cash that you're saving or earning from your day job. Access to a home equity line of credit is the next thing to do. And then the third would be like Drew is doing over there, and have other credit card balances or credit card balance transfer credit cards that you could make sure that you don't get into a sticky situation. If you have any questions about any of this, talk to my team. We work with clients who do this all the time. We can have a much more detailed conversation. So you can go to chatwithjwb.com if you're not a client yet. And if you are, reach out to your portfolio manager.
Well said. Well summarized, GC. Great concepts. Genius concepts. GC.
Drew,
you were the ace up the sleeve today, my friend. This was as good as build. Your energy was amazing. The knowledge that you spewed out, my head came close to exploding in the first half an hour. And then I thought we came into like a nice little rhythm there. I feel like I understand this. Still a little bit nervous. This has been awesome. Like I've been dying to find out about this, Drew. You and I have had a couple conversations. I've never had the privilege of also having GC here to explain it to me like a 3-year-old. So the balance of the two were fantastic. I really, really enjoyed this. Just really want to say that I'm very grateful for those of you.
Well, to be fair, when we talked about this before, it was typically after 2 or 3 adult beverages. So our minds were not functioning as well.
It was absolutely a lot more noise and I wasn't able to concentrate as good, but very, very grateful for the 45 people that have been with us for a full hour on a Tuesday, middle of the day. Never take that for granted. If you're on the podcast, you're on the YouTube channel, the stuff that's happening in the chat is just as or more valuable than what's happening on the show. So just try to make it one time so that you see how it is. Go to nyais.com, register for it. It'll come up on your calendar. Thursday, we're going to go back into the week, where we break down a property. You get to understand the individual concept of it all, ask questions. And then GC, I'm just going to give you, Drew, love you, bro. GC, last words.
Drew, your man, thank you so much for bringing the fire here on the show today. And I did want to mention anybody who wants to hang out with Drew more, come and hang out at the Super Duper meetup here, the Jacksonville Downtown Walking Tour that we are going to be hosting on June 24th. Drew's going to be there. And
if you're there another couple of days, I'm going to be there Wednesday to Sunday with a bunch of people. We can do several meetups if you want. I have no issues with that. I love this community.
First time I got to meet Drew was at the last one, and Drew instantly is the life of the party. Never a dull moment when Drew's around. And whether we're talking about, the adventures of you back in college and everything you've done since then, you're like the incredible man of mystery. And now we're talking about financial things. Well, you've got me hooked, man. Thank you so much for everything that you've meant to this community as well. The very first time that our community got together to meet up outside of doing this show here was you and Jen and Renee coming together. And that really was the genesis of us now doing events all over the country. And then this big one that we're going to do here in Jacksonville on June 24th. So you just mean a tremendous amount to me, to Pablo, to the entire community, and just really appreciate and looking forward to seeing you here soon.
And thank you so much for having me. I had a great time, guys.
So did we. Up until next time, remember, do not be an average investor.